Have you ever looked at the headlines coming out of the Middle East and felt like you're watching history unfold? Well, what if some people believe those headlines were actually written thousands of years ago? Today, we're diving into some specific biblical prophecies about modern nations and the lens people use to connect them to our world right now.
And that really brings us to the big question, right? Can these ancient texts seriously offer a blueprint for today's geopolitical landscape? It sounds pretty out there, but for a lot of people, the answer is a firm yes. So let's explore exactly how they connect those dots. All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll get on the same page about what prophecy even means in this context. Then, we'll jump into specific verses about Syria and Egypt. After that, we'll look at a prophesied alliance of nations. And finally, we'll wrap up by talking about what it means to interpret these signs today.
Okay, so first things first. Before we start talking about specific countries or reading ancient verses, we've got to lay the groundwork. We need to understand the framework itself. What exactly are we talking about when we say prophecy?
So biblical prophecy, at its core, is a message. It's something written down thousands of years ago that's believed to have come from a divine source. And for the framework we're looking at today, these aren't just seen as symbolic stories. They're understood as literal predictions of future events that will happen to specific real-world nations. That's the lens we'll be using.
All right, our first case study is Syria, and specifically its capital, Damascus. Now you have to understand, Damascus is one of the oldest cities on the entire planet that people have lived in without a break for thousands of years. And there's a really well-known prophecy in the book of Isaiah that speaks very dramatically about its future. And here it is, straight from Isaiah chapter 17. It says, "Behold, Damascus will cease to be a city and will become a heap of ruins." I mean, the language couldn't be more direct. It goes on to paint a picture of total desolation in the whole area. So how do people make sense of this ancient text in the 21st century?
Now, here's where the interpretation gets really interesting. The logic goes like this. Since Damascus has been continuously lived in for all of recorded history, it's never actually ceased to be a city, then this prophecy must be talking about an event that still has to happen. Proponents of this view see it as a very clear prediction of a future catastrophe, one that will finally make the city completely unlivable.
Okay, next up, let's shift our focus to another ancient powerhouse of the region, Egypt. The prophecies about Egypt, also from Isaiah, are a little different. They don't point to an outside attack, but to a kind of collapse from the inside out. Just listen to the language here in Isaiah 19. It predicts intense civil strife, Egyptians against Egyptians. It talks about a complete failure of leadership, a loss of national spirit. And then it points to this massive environmental disaster. Its very lifeblood, the Nile River, will be wasted and dried up.
So the key interpretation here is this kind of 1-2 punch. You've got social collapse and environmental collapse happening together. It's seen as predicting a time of deep internal division combined with a major crisis involving the Nile. For some, watching modern events like the Egyptian Revolution back in 2011 or seeing the ongoing disputes over the Nile's water rights feels like watching the early stages of this ancient prophecy coming to life.
All right, now let's zoom out. We've talked about individual nations, but one of the most talked about prophecies involves a much bigger conflict. The book of Ezekiel describes a very specific coalition of nations that will supposedly come together in the latter days to make a move against Israel.
And this table does a great job of laying out who's who, according to how Ezekiel 38 is interpreted. Using historical clues and analysis, scholars connect these ancient names to modern countries. So Persia is pretty clearly modern-day Iran. Put and Cush are widely seen as Libya and Sudan, and Gomer and Togarmah are linked to areas inside of modern Turkey.
The heart of this prophecy is that these specific nations are going to form a military alliance against Israel. So for people who see today's world through this lens, watching the political and military ties grow stronger between nations like Iran and Turkey, well, that's seen as incredibly significant. It looks like the potential groundwork being laid for this ancient prophecy to take shape right before our eyes.
So, we've looked at Syria, we've touched on Egypt, we've seen this prophesied alliance of nations. But what's the big picture here? What's the real takeaway from all of this?
And this is really the key point. For millions of people around the world, these ancient texts aren't just history. They are a living, breathing framework. It's a theological lens that brings a sense of order and meaning to the often chaotic headlines we see, suggesting that what's happening today is all part of a very old, very specific story that's still unfolding.
Which brings us to the final, critical question. Are these ancient words a literal roadmap for our future? Are they a reflection of past events we've misunderstood? Or are they maybe a more symbolic story
with lessons for every generation. Whatever you believe, there's no denying the incredible power these words continue to have in shaping how we see our world.